Welcome to today's episode of Between Neens and Deens. My name is Nina, and I'm joined by my best friend, partner, and baby daddy, Dayon.
And together, we're a couple of 20-something-year-olds just trying to navigate this whole first-time parenting thing.
So we're laying it all out there and talking about all the things you wish your parents told you about love, sex, and happiness. So this week's topic is something that I've thought a lot about for the last couple of weeks, and it's mostly just because I've been seeing a lot of infographics and memes on Instagram about reparenting. So this idea is not super new to me. Like, I think it was introduced to me when I was in school, like at UBC, studying like parent relationships and family development. And reparenting is essentially the act of giving yourself something that you didn't receive as a child. So usually that's affirmation, love, whatever it is. And for me, I was reading a lot of these infographics and I was like, oh my God, like there's so much about my childhood that I still carry with me to this day. And I see it manifesting in my relationship with you. I see it manifesting in my relationship not necessarily to Blue yet, because I think he's a little too young.
He's way too young.
He's way too young. But I have a fear that I might carry the same trauma that I had in childhood into my relationship with my own child.
And your parenting style.
Yeah, and it's like, that's the thing, is that it's intergenerational trauma. Like, it was carried probably from my parents' parents and their parents' parents, you know? And like, I want to be the one to break it because I'm aware of it. I don't know that they were aware of it, you know? Because I think that a lot of this idea of reparenting is something that's very new, at least in the mainstream. And I don't say any of this to like place blame on my parents. Like, I had, from what I can remember, like a really amazing childhood, and I love my parents to death. We have a great relationship, and you know, the way that I was raised is all that I really know. But at the end of the day, like, I know that I was loved, and I know that my parents did the best that they could with the resources that they had and the love that was available to them, you know, and like the culture within they grew up. So yeah, like all of this conversation about reparenting is not to place blame on anybody, but it's just to kind of realize that, hey, you know, like there were things that either happened to me or were done to me that isn't optimal, you know, in raising an environment that should be filled with like love, and like unconditional love and tenderness, you know?
It's more about just bringing awareness to it right now.
Yeah. So for me, I feel like kind of what struck me the most is the way that I deal with my emotions. My emotions are very, very volatile. I am a very volatile person, as you know very well.
No comment.
Yeah. When I get angry, I get really, really angry. And it's like, sometimes I see red and like, I don't even know what I'm saying. I don't know. Like, and it's like anger that sometimes when it's so angry, like it manifests into tears and like like yelling, and it's so irrational. But it's also, that's the example that was given to me by particularly my mom, when she got really angry or really upset with us as children. Like, that's what she would do, you know? She would yell, she would cry, and that's just the way that I understood that emotion. And so for me, like, I don't know a way of dealing with my emotions that's very calm because I never had that example. I mean, like with my dad, like he was very, like in all of these situations where my mom was a lot more expressive, my dad was more stoic until he snapped. And then when he snapped, it was like extreme anger. It was like scary. Like with my mom, it was kind of, you see it more often, so you're kind of not scared by it, but you're like, not fun when she does that. But like with my dad, it was like scary.
I feel like it's the same dynamic with my parents as well.
Yeah.
It's like my mom would be so upset and angry, and then my dad would just want to chill, and then my mom would like come at him for saying, why aren't you doing anything? And then once he actually does something, like all hell breaks loose. You know what I mean? Because he snaps, and then there's like no real stopping that.
But that's the thing, is that like, you see, that's your example of what emotions are, you know? Like, you have like two sides of the coin, where it's like, okay, like really emotional from your mother, and then like snaps from your father. And so like, I guess both of us inherited like both of those things. And I feel like you kind of take more after your dad, because you don't really get angry. You're a lot better about controlling your emotions until you snap, and then you like go off. So that's why like when we argue, if you're going off on me, then I'm like, okay, I really fucked up. So for me, it's more of like yelling, and like, why aren't you yelling back at me? And like, for me, like, I want to have a fight. Back.
It's just,
yeah, but it's like you're in a lot more control than I am.
Yeah, it's less blackout for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but I do have moments like, yeah, like where it does come to a certain boiling point, and then yeah, when I do snap, it's kind of, yeah, kind of.
Man, I've seen you go red, and that it is scary. not at me.
Not to my mom particularly. I think she's the only one that could really make my blood boil in that way.
It's the people that know you best.
Yeah, it's like she just knows like the buttons to push, but it comes to a point where like we've had so many of these fits that she just thinks like that's who I am, and that like I take that into every relationship that I have. Mm-hmm. But it's really,
I've never seen it. Yeah, before you were arguing with your mom.
Yeah, because we had that huge argument when we were on vacation together in Miami, and that was like a whole new side that Nina's never seen. And yeah, like what I tried to have my mom understand too, while I was in the heat of getting that angry, was like, why are you the only person that sees me like this? I'm like, I've literally been with Nina for 2 years and a half that time. And I was like, and like, she's never seen this side of me. Like, no one sees this side of me except for my mom. And then I tried to help, like, make her understand that, like, there's a deeper rooted issue here, like, you know, because we just get on each other in that way. And, yeah, I definitely can reach boiling points and be seen as a whole different human being where, I black out and see red, which it sucks that I make you feel that way sometimes, but...
But that's the thing. So, like, what's always been really interesting is that when I was growing up, I would get into huge fights with my mom. Like, she would be the only person, I mean, besides, like, my brother and my dad, because, you know, like, they're all in the same room, but, like, she would really be the only person that could bring that animal out of me, really.
Yeah.
And... she would always say, like, why are you so nice to other people? Like, why do you always show other people this super kind side of you and I get this ugly side of you? And she would always say that, you know, like, in her own way in Vietnamese. And, like, I never really understood it. Like, I didn't understand why it was that, like, I was so mean to her sometimes or so angry with her sometimes. And I think that now in reflecting, a part of it, I mean, obviously, like, I don't think it's all of it, but a part of it, I think, is because I would see my mom get really angry with us, like, yell at us and, like, get so upset and, like, really expressive with us. And then the second that the phone rings, you know, and someone's calling, and she's like, oh, hello, you know, or like we're outside and then someone walks by that she knows, and then it's like, oh, you know, like everything's fine. So I think
I've seen you switch like that too.
Yeah, and it's like I can actually do it way more seamlessly than you can, because we've been in public and you're upset and you just will you'll shut down.
I can't switch it like that. Yeah. I can't just like talk to the next person with like a whole different demeanor.
But I can turn it on, because that's what I learned. Like, I learned that you can turn on and off your emotions like that, you know, and like I'll still feel it. I'll feel the rage inside, but like I'm not gonna let other people see me like that.
It's like isolated almost. It's like just isolated towards me.
I put it in a little box.
Then, but it doesn't like seep.
It's whoever I'm closest to, and that's why I think like this is also kind of the part that's messed up about it, is that like I never shared this side of me that you know that's like that can get really angry or really upset. I never showed the side to other people that I've dated before, probably because I've never been as close with them as I am with you, where you know, like we're literally like we're family.
So it means you love me the most.
That's the thing, is that to me it's like it's almost like I rationalized it in my head as like, but that's how you know that I love you.
Like a communication of love, right?
Yeah, but that's so messed up that like. For me to show you that,
take it like she hates me, and then I'm like, I don't know.
But I'm like, no, like you don't know how much I love you, because like I remember on my 22nd birthday, like I got so upset with you that I was like yelling and screaming, and like we had just started dating. We were dating for a month, and my friends were like, who is this person that's like bringing this out of Nina? Like we've never seen her act like this before, and I never acted that way in front of my friends before. Like a red flag. Yeah, to them they were like, who the fuck is this guy? And like to me, I was like, no, you don't get it. Like I love him so much that he's the only person that can like bring this out of me. And it's so weird because it's so wrong and it's so bad, and that kind of tells you like how much trauma that I really needed to work through, that I still need to work through, because the way that I understand emotions and the best way to express yourself is so convoluted with like, it's like the louder that you can be, like the better you're conveying your emotions, but like it's just so irrational. And so I feel like for me, like there was a lot of ways that manifested into like other parts of my life where, you know, like I wasn't allowed to be really angry or sad. And, like, I couldn't be, like, upset about things because it would,
right?
yeah, and, like, it was my responsibility and my brother's responsibility to regulate my parents' happiness. You know, like, if we were upset, they would be upset at us for being upset. It sucks to admit these things. It sucks to admit that this childhood that you remember that was so beautiful and, like, these people that you love so much can also cause, you know, like, lasting trauma.
Yeah.
And
but the thing is, I don't feel like any of it is, like, intended that way. It just
no,
happens.
none of it. Yeah. And I don't think that, I mean, obviously I can't speak for everyone's families, and there's a whole range of trauma, you know, that's passed down from parent to child. But for my parents, like, 100%, like, they did it all out of love, you know, and it was their way of disciplining me. And I gained a lot of really positive, like, attributes and, like, a lot of positive associations with the ways that they raised me. But I also inherited a lot of things that, you know, I don't deal with properly. And it translates into my relationship with you, my relationship to my work. Like, I'm an intense overachiever because I was taught that that was my value. And, like, that's why I attribute so much of my identity to my career. But it's like, I am also a person, you know? And a lot of that just stems from, you know, like, if you don't get good grades, then it's like, what are you doing? What is your value? You know? And, like, there's so much. Like, there's so much to unpack. And I think when I really realized it hurt. It really hurt.
Yeah, I feel like every single person that I've, like, met on a deeper level and like, had a chance to learn about their history and relationship with their parents, it usually explains so much about their character and why they do certain things that they do. And I just found that with, like, a lot of my friends, a lot of, like, you know, my past relationships, like, and even with, like, myself and how I view the world, like, everything is based on the way you've been parented. And, like, yeah, like, that's why we have to be really conscious of, like, what we tell our child, because and how we treat our child, because that's all ways that, you know, this whole world and their way of loving and just, like, everything, you know, it gets reflected in that way based on how you parent. And yeah, it's crazy, like, as we get older we can really see how, I mean, especially once you, like, really think about the topic at hand and, like, and really try to break it all down, that's when you realize, you know, how much your parents have affected your personal life, and how, you know, it's not necessarily you, it's not your temperament, it's still something that you can change, and you can break the cycle and the habit. It just takes that moment to be aware of it. Even just talking to somebody, you know, it helps a lot. You know what I mean? Like, being able to talk to friends and talk. Yeah, because, I mean, these are deeper issues, or, like, deeper things that, you know, you can't really just talk with to anybody, but, you know, it's good to, like, find some people that you can. And
that you can actually trust, man. You don't want to tell people shit like this and then they're going to, like, use it against you. Go listen to our Toxic Friends podcast.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, don't.
That guy used it against me, man. I was pretty mad.
But yeah, so anyways, we're getting off topic. But I think that also, like, I mean, the idea of reparenting yourself and, like, loving your inner child, and it's, like, that idea of, like, giving your inner child a hug, you know, and talking to yourself and affirming that, you know, you deserve love. You deserve, like, all of these things that you didn't have as a child. And like, even if I think about the way that I deal with stress, I remember growing up and, like, I was very well aware of, like, our financial situation, you know, like, I would see my parents fight about money. I would see, like, my mom would, like, talk to us about money, and, like, it was a very outward way of dealing with stress, which is why when I encounter stressful situations in my life, I will tell you about it. I'll, like, stomp around the house and, like, huff and puff, and, like, you know, like, it's very outward. So it just goes to show, like, how pervasive it is, like, in every aspect of your life. And yeah, I feel like I've just gotten to a point now, especially with us raising our own child, where I just want to do better.
Yeah.
Like we've been reading a book that was, like, how to be, like, awesome parents, or I don't even remember the title, but, like,
it was, like, great. It was, like,
things great parents do.
Things great parents do.
Yeah, so it's, like, it's about how, you know, like, literally, like, language matters. Everything that you say to your child matters. And
that book hit home for me, because a lot of things was, like, like, rewording things, right? Like, when your child does something, you know, amazing or great, you can't be like, you're so great, or you're so smart, or you're the best, you know what I mean? And when we read that part, I was like, damn, like, that makes sense. Like,
So, like, what it really is trying to say is that, like, you should be complimenting the action and not the person. Like, you instead of saying, you're so great, you can say something like, oh my God, you were able to read all the letters in the alphabet really well. You know? So it's, like, something that they did that was great, not them as a person. Because you as a person, just having a value attributed to it, like, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. You're the best? What does that mean? You know?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like, for me, I've always received so much praise and love from my parents, which... I mean, if you think about it, it sounds like such a great thing, right? And and it is. Like, there's a lot of positives.
In a lot of ways, you're very secure.
Yeah, and that's great. But in the same time, like, there is, like, a little bit too much, right? When you get too much of praise, and it kind of builds, like, these certain complexes in the child, right? So then when they do... I mean, the book broke it down as well. Like, when they do, like... when they not succeed in something, right? If they do something poorly, then it's like life-shattering. You know what I mean? And it's, like, it's very... Yeah, it's like a knife with two swords. Like,
it's kind of like when...
Or, is that a knife with two swords?
It's a double-edged sword. A knife with two swords.
That was completely wrong. It's
a double-edged sword. But it was also... It's also like a situation where, like, you were so taught and it was so ingrained in you that if you don't try at something, you are naturally so talented. And so then when you do try and you don't do very well, then you're like, oh shit, like... I don't ever want to try because I don't ever want to feel like I'm not great at something, you know? So it's like, and it makes it really hard for you to apply yourself.
And that's what I mean. Like obviously, like, none of this was with malicious intent from my parents. You know what I mean? Like, it's just...
Well, I mean, praise usually comes from love.
From extreme love, right? Excessive love. But the thing is, like, yeah, there would be things that were shocking to them. And I mean, shocking to myself as well. Like in grade 2, like, I had multiple choice or something on a test, and there was a lot of things I didn't know the answers to, and I just didn't circle anything. And the teachers were like, they called my parents and they're like, we just thought that was really weird or concerning, because it's like how he could have literally circled anything, just guess, right? But I just didn't want to do that because it's that complex.
You'd rather just not do it.
I'd rather just, or like, and there was so many things I just didn't hand in because I was like, you kind of have that, like, fear of failure at that point, because, like, you've been 100%. So praised and you feel like, oh, everything. And that was the biggest thing too with me and my relationship with basketball, is because every single time, like, my dad would be like, you're the best, you're the greatest out here. And I almost felt like I didn't even really need to practice, because that was never something that was, like, you know, put as a priority. Like, my dad would just immediately tell me I'm the best, and I never practiced. So, you know, it gives you that complex of, like, I'm better than these people who are constantly training, but that's not really the case, you know what I mean? And if I'm not better, then I have that excuse to fall back on, like, oh, that's because I don't practice or I don't train or whatever it may be.
You always have an excuse.
Exactly. And that's something that I've realized is, like, the psychological effect of, you know, too much praise on a young child, you know what I mean?
It's interesting because, like, our experiences are so opposite. Like, for me, it wasn't that my parents broke me.
That's why you're more successful than me.
Yeah, but that's the thing, is that it's not that my parents broke me down, but they really taught me that hard work is what gets you there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, like, you know, obviously there is a lot of other factors, but for me, I was taught that if you, like, my dad literally verbatim is like, just put your head down and do your work. And, like, it's very much that idea of, you know, like, the American dream, and, like, that if you do hard work, people will notice, and that's not always the case, especially when you're talking about people that deal with, like, systemic racism and things like that. But I was very much raised on that principle, and so I truly believe that if I work hard, then I will get whatever I want in life. Mm-hmm. And if I don't have it, then I just have to work harder. And it builds this whole complex around success and about achievement and, like, overachievement, you know? And, like, yeah, it goes back to that idea of, like, finding value in yourself as a worker, as someone that achieves things. And if you're not winning, then what are you?
Yeah, and that's why I feel like there's, like, a happy medium, right? Like, I'm going to go back to, like, my relationship with basketball and how my dad was just like, you're always the best. I think, you know, if a method that could have been taken was, like, you know, you have talent, but talent is not enough. And if you want to take, like, if you want to take this more seriously, like, you're going to have to take these steps and really work hard at it. You know what I mean? Instead of, like, oh, you're just the best and, like, you're better than those people. And let's say if someone beat me in basketball, it'd be like, oh no, like, I either it'd be really confusing to my dad and he'd be like, you know, come off on me like, what the hell were you thinking, or what were you doing, or why did you do that stupid pass, or why did you do this? or it's like, oh no, those people suck, like they just had a lucky day, or like all this shit, you know what I mean, like you're the best, like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So like it never really had that like realistic, I never had that realistic view of like,
it was a very warped perception of reality.
And that's but like you're so young, and all you really know is like what you're being taught and what you kind of see, and you know what I mean, like I wasn't able to see out of that because my dad was my idol, you know what I mean, like, and you know anything that my parents told me, like I really respect it, and I still do, but it's just like you gotta kind of take it with a grain of salt and understand that like there's other ways of viewing the world now as well. And I think it's important to be able to like balance it out in a sense, you know what I mean, like
we
not
talk
doing
so
too
much
of one thing.
we talk so much about how we want to raise Blue and any potential children that we may have in the future, but like I mean we both, like neither of the way that we were parented is perfect, and there were things with both of our childhoods that were great and things that weren't so great, and so
and we'll
for
definitely
us,
make mistakes as well.
I think like for us, like what we strive to do is really be realistic and encouraging and loving and like all those things, like unconditional love but not unconditional praise, you know. And like for me, like what I personally want to work on is getting a better handle of my emotions, and that's not to, you know, like it's not the other extreme that's like be emotionless, you know, like that's not the opposite. The opposite is being, you know, rational,
being in control, I think.
Actually it's not even rational, it's just being in better control and expressing it in ways that are healthier. So for me, it's not just in the way that I communicate with Blue, like I very much have to work on the way that I communicate with you. It rhymed. But it's because like, you know, like he's gonna see the way that I interact with you, and I don't want to tell him one thing and do another thing, because he will not listen to what I'm saying. He will replicate exactly what I do. And I don't want to pass on that type of really poor way of dealing with my emotions onto him. And like, it's not even kind of in the things that I do or say. Like I also notice that when I'm really upset with you, like I will completely when I'm really upset, I'll completely shut down and I won't talk to you. And I'll just do like the silent treatment. And guess what? That's something that I learned from my mom. And it's something that I really hated. It's something that I hated.
It doesn't happen that often anymore.
Yeah, not so much, because
you've been getting better.
I try to like talk myself out of it. But that's the thing, is that, you know, even though I can turn it on and off to other people, like I will sit here and just like fume. You know, like I can't get over it. Like you will be upset with me, but then you'll always come over and like you'll kiss me and be like, I love you. Like, but for me, like it physically like hurts me to say I love you, even though I do. But it's just like I don't feel love right now. You know, like I feel anger, and like it's so hard to get out of that cloud. But I constantly have to talk myself through it, because there's a part of my brain that's like, Nina, you don't want to be this person. Like, Nina, you need to communicate.
Admitting it is the first step.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that every single time, like I feel like it gets better, and that's why our arguments have gotten, like they go by a lot faster.
Yeah,
and it's not because we're sweeping it under. Yeah, it's not because we're sweeping it under the rug, but it's because like I'm able to be like, okay, like that's not a great way of communicating. You know, like just yelling at the top of your lungs is not really going to communicate effectively what you want to say, because usually when I get upset with you, what you end up doing is getting defensive. And that's, you learned that from where?
From everyone in my life.
Yeah.
from my mom, for sure. Actually, from both my mom and my dad.
But that's the thing, is that like it's just like literally super everything defensive about us. It's honestly like our parents are dating each other, you know, because like I know, but it's like
I see what you
the
mean.
things that we inherited, like we are our own people, and we select. Like I remember I finally told my mom, like I was like, you know that the reason I am the way that I am is because of you, right? She was like, is it? And I was shocked. Like, yes. Like
I mean, we're all subconsciously acting in ways that.
But the thing is that like she didn't even realize that, and like she thought that I was blaming her, and I was like, I'm not blaming you, because you know, like I know that you love me, and I know you did it out of love, but you have to realize that if you don't understand why I get so upset with you and I act the way that I am when I'm so upset, like you do have to look at the way that you act when you're really upset, and where did I learn that from? You know, and like why do I snap? Because I learned that from my dad. And it's like you have to realize as parents that the things that you do are replicated in your child, you know? And so, yeah, it was so interesting to me, because I was like, how did you never consider that before? That the things that you did have a direct effect on me. And I think for them, they were like, the things that they say to us, I think they thought carried more weight than what we actually saw, but it very much is like what you see.
And I feel like these things, like we hear like quite often, like subtly in like movies and stuff where they're like, you're being just like your mother, and they're like, don't say that, and then like, but like, yeah, like sometimes like our, you know, our uglier sides, or even like things we do, like is a mirror of like our family, our parents.
Yeah,
so.
It's the beautiful things too, you know, the great things about us.
The great things, yeah, for sure. But
that's not what this podcast is about.
It's about changing the negatives.
The things that can be worked on.
Yeah.
So this is a good place to do our plug for Policy Genius. If you guys aren't familiar, it is a life insurance marketplace. And when you're shopping for life insurance, there can be a lot of questions that come up, like how much coverage you need, what's the best company, and how much does it even cost. And so at a time like this, it's more important than ever to have life insurance, but it can be a little bit complicated to go out and shop for it. So that's where Policy Genius comes in. They are, like I said, a life insurance marketplace, and they will find you the best possible price. They handle all the red tape, all of the legal. They compare a bunch of quotes from the top companies, and it just takes a couple minutes to compare them, and you could be saving up to $1,500 or more a year. So if you need life insurance, but you're not sure where to start, make sure you head to policygenius.com. They will find you the best rate, handle the complete process, and they'll get you and your family protected, and hopefully give you one less thing to worry about. So try it out today. So when we're thinking about healing and nurturing your inner child, like there are things that you can say. Some of these are, I love you, I hear you, you didn't deserve this, I'm sorry, you did your best. Like all of these things, I feel like are things that I should honestly say to myself on a regular basis, because I feel like I can pinpoint a lot of different times in my life where that should have been said to me instead of the things that were said to me. And I feel like I keep bringing up this idea of like overachieving, but what it really comes down to is kind of you become an overachiever because you think that if you get good grades, if you like, I don't know, do what your parents like ask you to do, if you act accordingly, then that will make you lovable. You know, like their love is on the condition that you act a certain way, that you are a certain way. Mm-hmm. But you should be loved regardless, you know? And like there are definitely times growing up that even though I know now that my parents did it all out of love and that they do love me very much, there were definitely times where I'm like, why are you doing this to me? Do you even love me? You know? And like I don't think that as a child you should ever feel that way. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of times like when me and my brother would express like how we feel, it wouldn't ever be understood, or it would kind of be like, oh, you're being dramatic. You know, mm-hmm. like if we're crying about something, like the very common phrase is like, quit crying or I'll give you something to cry about, you know? And it's like your emotions should be valid. Mm-hmm. And like if your parents do wrong by you, like they should be able to say that they're sorry, you know? But I never felt that when I was in an argument with my mom. Every single time that I was in an argument with my mom, I had to be the one to say that I was sorry, even if it wasn't my fault. I would have to say that I was sorry and like beg and grovel until she would talk to me again. And that's just because that's the way that she dealt with her emotions. And eventually, when I was in high school, I understood that. And so that's why I knew that, you know, like that's just the way that my mom is. And so if I'm going to make amends with her, then that's just something that I have to do. And so that's why even with us, like, I'm not afraid to say that I'm sorry. I'm not afraid to admit that I'm wrong. But I feel like even when we argue sometimes, like, you'll get defensive and you won't admit that you were the one that was wrong. But for me, like, it's I don't have, like, the ego and pride, you know, to like never say that I'm sorry, because even if I'm not wrong, like I'll still say it sometimes.
Yeah,
but
I've had experiences with people that like really like under no circumstance can say they're sorry, or it's just really tough for them to do so, and you just have to just be the bigger person, so to speak, and just say, listen, I don't want to argue about this, I'm sorry. Even though it's not your fault.
Yeah. But I mean, it's also like, even if like you didn't instigate it or things, you know, like situations escalate and it takes two to tango. So yeah, definitely. But those are some ways that you can heal and nurture your inner child. Like I think a lot of introspection and just sitting with it, you know, like allowing the trauma and the hurt to like wash over you and to address it.
Yeah, and it can't really be anyone else's responsibility except for your own.
Yeah, like don't project it onto your partner, because, you know, I do that sometimes to you. Like I don't project my issues onto you, but I think that I project my emotions onto you. And that, again, was something that was done onto me. And, you know, like that's not a healthy way to deal with your emotions.
And I would also say, like, don't expect your parents to change. You know what I mean? So
yeah, everybody, yeah,
because like
you got to do the work for you.
I feel like the classic example is always like that kid that just wants to hear like their parents say they're proud of them or something
Yeah.
like that, or like receive that word of affirmation.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just got to come to terms to the fact that like it's not anyone's responsibility but your own, and
Yeah.
sometimes you'll just never hear that from that person. Like, how many times in movies do you see like the father die and say, I'm not proud of you, and
Yeah.
then, you know what I mean, like it just fucks up the kid's life forever. But
it's also just like understanding, a lot of this is understanding that you don't need somebody else's validation.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that I learned, like, I live my life without seeking approval or validation from anybody, like even from you, you know, and like I feel like that for me is very healthy, because I'm able to validate myself and I don't seek other people to, you know, gas me up or like make me feel like I'm a good person or a kind person. Yeah. And like I think that in a lot of ways, like I had to tell myself these things, and even though like you know, like I would tell myself in the mirror, I love you, and like all of these things. And that was more related to like how I dealt with like my body image issues. But I feel like in a lot of ways I've been able to, through introspection, like deal with a lot of these things. And it's only recently that I really, like, I think the most painful thing for me was realizing that it was so directly caused by my parents. I think a lot of the times that I would try to heal these things within myself, and a lot of the work that I did, I was just saying, oh, you know, like you're just like this, and I was healing these things that I was just like. But I think for me, what was really hard, and what might be hard for a lot of people that really love and adore their parents, is realizing that your parents aren't perfect, and that the way that you were treated sometimes wasn't right. And I think like coming to terms with that dyad, like loving somebody so much and also realizing that they caused you harm, like I think that was really painful for me. And like even now, like it's hard for me
I
to...
think a lot of that is just like, it's just because I feel like our parents are unaware of like what effect that really does have on somebody. And I think because even they're, I mean 100% our parents are victims of that as well, like from their parents, you know what I mean? It's just something that continues down the line. And even with like body image, like sometimes, you know, even like the things that your parents say have like a negative effect, and they probably don't realize what they're doing.
Yeah, my mom would always be like, oh, you gained weight. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. I don't need you to point that out. And she's like, I pointed out because I love you. Wouldn't you want somebody that like to tell you so you're aware? And I'm like, I am fucking aware. I don't need you to tell me.
Yeah. They don't realize the effect of it.
It comes out of love.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is everything comes out of love, but I'm like, I don't need that negativity in my life.
And that's what took me some time to like understand too, that like, I mean, my dad would always be like, oh, you're so skinny, like why are you so skinny? You need to eat more, you need to be bigger, right? You know what I mean? Like all this stuff, you need to be stronger. And like I used to let it really get to me and just be like, man, like I would try and like get really offended when he called me skinny. But now I'm just kind of like, I'm happy with my body and I don't really care. And I understand that like he's saying it in a way like out of love, because like he wants what's best for me, and he thinks like if I was big and strong would be like best for me. But that's just like not really what I want in life. So I think like it's just coming to terms to that, and just like understanding that like what they are saying is still out of love. Yeah, and they're human, they make mistakes, and they're unaware of like the effect that their words may have on their children.
But yeah, so like what happened to me is, you know, it's actually relatively common. It's like the idea of like helicopter parenting and like overparenting, which I think is prevalent in a lot of different cultures. And what happened to you is overvaluing. And so it's actually really interesting. Like there have been studies that show that kids that are overvalued are, a lot of them end up becoming narcissists, or they're more likely to become narcissists.
And we come from a long line of narcissists, I'm going to tell you that much.
Yeah, I mean, even, yeah, like, my impression of Serbia when we visited, I was like, these are some very proud people.
Yeah, I mean, it's instilled in the culture, you know what I mean? Like,
it's like the whole world revolves around Serbia.
Yeah, especially former Yugoslavia, but...
Yeah, so it's just, it goes to show that, you know, like, breaking your kids down or building them up way too high, like, two extremes can have very detrimental effects. Yeah, I guess. And like I definitely do see a bit of a narcissist. I wouldn't call you a narcissist, but I do see like narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah, I mean, and I can admit that in myself. I definitely see it sometimes, you know what I mean? Like when I look in the mirror for too long, it happens.
But that's not what narcissism is. Like narcissism is believing like, you know, like that the world revolves around you. And so for those of you guys that don't really know, narcissism it's an actual mental condition. So that's why I say that I feel like you have tendencies. I don't know that I would classify you as a narcissist, but it's a condition where people have an inflated sense of their own self-importance. And it's like a deep need for attention, for admiration, you tend to have troubled relationships and also a lack of empathy. I'm reading this off of Google, but I mean, just off the bat, just off of that, you know, type in what is narcissism, what pops up, like, I can already see a lot of it in you. Whereas it's interesting when we were reading...
a lot. I would say some of the things. I wouldn't say a lot.
Inflated sense of own importance, check.
Well, yeah.
A deep need for excessive attention,
well, yeah.
Check. Admiration, check.
Okay.
Troubled relationships.
Nah, I got a great relationship.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I have trouble?
Lack of empathy for others? Troubled? Yes. Check.
Yeah, I get it. You know what? Actually, fuck. Reality check, huh?
Yeah, it's...
Yeah, I guess that does kind of explain me.
Yeah, 100%.
You're getting better. I'm a product of my parents.
I know, but that's the thing is that, like, you are, but it's also... you are also your own person. So the same where it's like, you know, like the trauma that happened to me is not of my choosing, but the way that I move forth in my life and the way that I process it is my choosing.
Yeah.
And so even though, you know, these things seem like it's very much you.
It's just about bringing awareness to it and then trying to change it.
Yeah, I think
being aware of it. That's the thing, because because it was kind of ingrained in us at such a young age, and it's something that like we see in our parents as well, and it's just like a way that because I mean we look to our parents as to like how to become adults, right? So we see that in them, it's ingrained in us, and I think a lot of the actions are very subconscious at that point. You're not really even thinking about it, but you're doing it. And I can definitely say like when I am being a little bit more of like a narcissist, like I can realize that I'm acting from a place where I'm not really like stopping to think about it and be conscious of my behavior and my actions.
Yeah.
And I think that's why like bringing awareness to it is really important, because then it's easier for you to catch it when it does happen. And like obviously like also not being in denial about it, because I think like if you're in denial about it, then you're never really going to change. Like admitting is the first step, and then bringing awareness to it and consciously making an effort to break that habit and to become a better person, you know what I mean? Because being a narcissist, like, is not a good thing. You know what I mean?
So, I can't believe we just realized in this podcast that you're a narcissist.
Well, I feel like sometimes, though, it's not, it's not all the time.
But that's the thing is that, like, I feel like a lot of these features that you do have, we've talked about before, and we've addressed them individually without ever putting it together to be like, oh, this is what it is. They're all linked to each other, and it's all manifested itself in this way. You know, like we've definitely talked about the fact that, you know, like you need a lot of admiration and compliments from other people, or that like you tend to think, you know, like it's what you're talking about, where it's like you feel like you are like this really great person because you got all of this praise and that you don't need to try. You know, like I feel like we kind of talked about, or even the lack of empathy. That one's hilarious to me because I feel like we talked about that recently.
It happens sometimes.
Yeah, like I think it's hard for you sometimes to like put yourself in other people's shoes.
Yeah. So let's go back to what you said. So for me, it was overvaluing, which led to an inflated sense of self,
some narcissistic
some little narcissistic tendencies,
just a little sprinkle
things of that nature, you know what I mean? And for you it was overparenting.
Yeah.
So what kind of goes in that realm?
Like what happens to people that are overparented?
Yeah. I mean, if you had to break it down, like in the sense like how you just kind of broke down my whole situation.
Since I broke you down, you want me to break myself down now?
No, not break yourself down. I mean break the topic down, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or break like the you know what it leads into and things like that.
So I mean there are a lot of dangers I feel like to overparenting, or a lot of like negative effects that it can have. The first one that comes to mind is not being able to cope very well, so like just very inefficient at coping, whether that's with stress, emotions, like that's kind of the whole topic that we like have covered today. So just my inability to cope with negative emotions, I would say. And then usually that leads to like a greater level of stress, which I do generally feel like I'm a more stressed person than you are, also because I feel like what I witnessed was a constant state of stress, and so then I learned to live my life in a constant state of stress. And also like higher levels of depression. And this is just doing a quick Google. And I mean, obviously there are critics of overparenting, and there are people that you know, support it. There's like a bunch of spectrums
of
people
course.
that feel a certain way about it, but I do really believe that it does lead to higher levels of depression because it is something that I directly dealt with. And when I told my parents that I was depressed, when I told them that I was suicidal, like, they didn't believe me because they were like, how's that possible? Like, we raised you and we see you every single day. Like, and again, it was a manifestation of invalidating my emotions.
Yeah.
It was saying, you don't feel that way. You're wrong. But I do feel this way. And I think that for them, they were like, oh, like, if you don't need a therapist. I was like, I genuinely want to talk to somebody. And they were like, you don't need a therapist. What, you can tell them, you can tell us. And I was like, you don't understand. That's the issue. I can't talk to you.
Yeah.
You don't understand.
That is the root of it, yeah. It's like invalidating. And we are at like a different age where like depression is like at I would say like a record-breaking high. Like the amount of like
people that have anxiety,
and depression. I think
it's a lot of these things like
yeah. I mean,
together.
like social media is a big cause of it, and you know, just like it's just the way our world is now. And I think that we can't expect our parents to kind of relate in that sense because they're like, well, why are you like? It doesn't make sense to them because they don't have the same exposure to kind of everything that we do, you know what I mean? And what I imagine the younger generation will, like, you know, Don Blue's generation, like they're all gonna go through things that we won't necessarily understand, but it's in our place to try and just stay educated and like, you know, validate what they're feeling and what they're telling us.
I think that's the
even
biggest
if we don't
thing.
understand
like,
it.
I think that would have that has like the biggest effect in my personal opinion, is that if my parents validated the way that I felt, even when I was injured and I would be like, this hurts, they'd be like, no, it doesn't, drink some water, you're fine. You know, like if they had just validated what I felt, what I was experiencing, whether that was joy, whether that was sadness, whether that was anger, I think that I would feel heard more. And I think that a lot of my root of my depression, and I like, it comes in waves. Like there are definitely times where I'm like, oh, like that was just a thing I experienced in high school, you know, like I'm not depressed anymore. But I definitely do get bouts of depression, and I think for me a lot of it is tied to like my idea of self and like not living up to that, and like always feeling like I need to be this perfect version of myself, and when I fall short of that, that's when like my depression kicks in, whether that's like with relationships or my work, or with like friendships, like anything that I can pick myself apart at, that's what I start to do, and then it becomes this really unhealthy cycle. And like this is like I feel like a whole other podcast that we could talk about, because it is layered as hell. But yeah, like that's another effect of overparenting. So like that's not to say that all these things happen to everybody. They definitely all happen to me, and I think in a lot of ways, like it's really normalized, you know, like the idea that we live in a constant state of stress, or that like everybody that I know is constantly hustling, constantly feeling like they're not doing enough, even though you're going to school, working a job, have a side hustle. Like, how is that not enough? You know? And like, what were we taught at such a young age that everything that we're doing is not enough? And like, it's so normal. And it's interesting that like we just have such different experiences.
Yeah, I'm like
because
the opposite.
You're the exact opposite. And I never really met anybody like you before, because everybody that I know is always but like everybody that I know is like so high strung, you know, is like I'm trying to achieve, whereas you're like, I'm just trying to fucking chill. So I mean, at the end of the day, like these are our own experiences and how like our parenting has affected us, and like we said, like there's so many nuances, so many other things that like come into play, and like, you know, like overparenting or overvaluing could affect you in a very, very different way because of the culture that you were raised in, because of, you know, like other circumstances. But yeah, like I feel like it was important for me to want to share this, because I feel like it was something that I kept so deep inside of myself, that felt so like a lot of these traits are so integral to who I believed I was as a person. And I feel like it's reassuring to even just read articles about it being like a thing, you know, that it reaffirms that like, okay, it didn't just happen to me, and like it's something that I can work through, that there are things that I can do to work through it. So yeah, like these are just our own experiences, but I wanted to share that with you guys, and I hope that some of you guys out there can find some solace in it. Yeah, if you're at all curious about it, just look up overparenting. Just look up healing your inner child, and you'll find a lot of stuff on it.
Yeah, because there's so many different ways that it can like affect the person, and like I said earlier, like each person, like their kind of traits and like their behaviors are usually passed down from their parents and the parenting style. So I think like it's important for you to like understand yourself from that and understand like why certain people are the way they are as well, and
it helps you to better understand people too, I think, and like give a little bit of compassion. Like I don't think that you should put up with, you know, like abusive behaviors and things like that, you know, just because you can understand it or understand why someone's acting that way. But I think that it helps us all kind of understand each other a little bit better. Like for me, when I understood the way that you were raised, I understood you better. And I understood why you did the things that you did, why, you know, you need like constant compliments from me, or like why you're a words person and why I'm not a words person.
Yeah.
Like that, isn't that so interesting? Like our love languages are so different because of the ways in which words were used to us.
Yeah.
For you, words gave you value. To me, words did not. And
100%.
Words were something that I learned like don't hold value. So this is a heavy one and a long one, but it felt like a conversation that I really, really wanted to have this week. And I am glad that we did, because I feel a little bit lighter.
Me
So,
too.
yeah, it was nice. It was nice to chat with you about this. And as always, I hope that you guys have a fantastic day. You can follow us at Neens Deens. I am your girl Neens.
And I'm Dale's Day Off.
And we'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.